So I'm going to be talking about the intersections of poetry and social justice today because poetry is something that I really love doing. I love writing and I love advocating for myself as well as other people. So yesterday was the anniversary of the event that undoubtedly gifted me this opportunity to sit here with you all today. So last year on June 5th, one of the greatest moments in my life happened, which at the age of 18 is a big thing to say. Merely a week after the murder of George Floyd, I and a current alum, Anaya Rogers, planned and hosted a successful sit-in for Black Lives Matter in front of our very own cathedral. A year later, I still remember the sleepless nights, the days I would go without eating leading up to the event, the worried text messages, the hoops I was forced to jump through, the whole 9 yards. But all of that was worth it when throngs of people poured onto the grass to support BSU's incredible event. All of the hard work culminated into this one moment. It was topped off by my first interview with the Washington Post. At this sit-in, I recited a poem that I had written during my sophomore year at NCS. I've never once considered myself the world's greatest poet or the world's toughest activist. On most days, I can't even bring myself to open an empty Google Doc or grab a pen. On most days, I can't even bring myself to wonder how the world can be better, let alone how one 18-year-old girl can change it. That's my first lesson for everyone here. You may not feel smart enough or capable enough or good enough, but you are enough. You're more than enough. So I bet you're all wondering, what could poetry and social justice possibly have in common enough for you to want to talk about it? All right, number one, starting is the worst part. I am a full-hearted believer that starting any task is the worst part of that task. It takes me a good hour to 13 days average to even psych myself up enough for one single task, but that's just the easiest part of the worst part. The thing that makes the start the worst part is the doubtful voice in the back of your head, the little devil on your shoulder that's trying to convince you that you can't do this, that your idea isn't good enough. Whether this idea is about a poem about your lack of emotional intelligence as a result of society's pressure on you, or the idea to host a sit-in during the height of COVID, that voice is loud and it isn't planning on going away anytime soon. But what did I just tell all of you about being enough? This is the first hardship you're going to come across. I urge everyone to dust off their shoulders with me, to cover your ears for just one moment and to block out that voice. Can you still hear it? If not, good. You made it past the start, but it only gets harder. Let's see how tough our endurance is. Number two, the first line is always the hardest. The start may be the worst part, but the first line, and while it sounds like the same concept, it isn't, is the hardest. This is the part of the process that includes hours of deleting, balling up paper, wearing a hole through the floor as you pace back and forth, and some dramatic hair pulling and silent screaming like you're on a sitcom. When you look up the rules of creative writing, they tell you the first line is the most important. You have to grab your reader's attention. You have to say something so profound, so intriguing, so mysterious that people want to read more. So no pressure, right? You have to pitch yourself, your event, your idea, your big plan to change the world in such a succinct way that people will want to join you in your fight. Again, sounds so easy. I have absolutely no tips on writing the first line. Sometimes the first line does what the little voice in your head doesn't. It makes you want to quit. It makes you want to give up. I urge you not to give up. It's okay to take a break because taking a break implies that you will come back and try again and get that first line. Number three, the middle is as daunting as it seems. Mid-sentence, mid-thought, mid-pitch, almost halfway through there. You're almost halfway there like BT Big Time Rush says, your tank runs out of gas. Ironically, this is what happened to me writing this TED Talk. If you thought the first 2 steps of your journey were hard, I'm sorry to say it only gets harder. Remember when I mentioned your endurance? This is where it comes into play. Here's the part of your journey where you're out of breath and wondering if it's even worth it. It's the midway point, so reasonably you're considering backing out. And if you aren't considering backing out, then you're wondering how to move forward. You're doubting yourself. There's only one word for this: endure. Endure through the pain and the doubt because you have gone through the first 2 steps. You're almost halfway there. You have started this tremendous journey, captivated your audience with the first line, and eventually you will get through this arduous middle. Number 4, the ending is bittersweet. There is a certain sadness in something ending. There is something so finite about putting down your last period, placing the pen aside, and realizing your project is finished. There's something so freeing at the same time about knowing that what you've done to set out to do is done. And yet, there's an emptiness inside of your chest. You've given bits and pieces of yourself to this project that you don't know if you have anything left to give. Never mind the fact that you don't know if you have anything left to keep, so you don't turn into a shell of who you used to be. This is where you have to remind yourself you are not just a poet, you are not just an activist for social justice, you are a person. I remember after the event that I hosted last year that I took 48 hours to sleep. My parents were actually very concerned that I didn't get up. I had run out of tank in my gas. A person is deserving of rest, of love, of a shoulder to lean on. Do not extinguish your light by burning too fast, too hard, for too long. And number 5, the next project isn't any easier. I'm sorry to tell you guys, after all of this, after you've done your first project, it does not get easier. You have the experience under your belt and you know what you want to improve on, but everything is still just as hard as it was the first time around. That's life for you. Starting is next to impossible. You'll keep deleting the first line. Your body and mind will slow down towards the middle and you'll go through the period of mourning at the end. But with each poem, with each action you take, with each project you try to take on, there's always going to be a sense of empowerment, always a sense of fulfillment. Your trust, it's going to grow a little bit warmer each time because you did that. You did that. So those are the 5 ways poetry and social justice are the same. But what's the intersection of them? I have 3 that I was able to come up with. It is your poem. It is your fight. It has to be personal. So for me as a Black woman, that is my fight. Every time I write a poem, every time I sit down to try to solve a problem that is not going to get solved by just me, it's my fight. It's my poem. I'm talking for myself as a Black woman. I'm talking for my friends as a Black woman. I'm talking to other people as a Black woman. I'm passionate. That's the second part. I'm very passionate about what I do. So when I get to that middle, I know that I'm going to keep going because I know that I want to get to that end and then start all over again. Perseverance. I have to persevere because this is my fight. I've made it personal. I've picked my passion and I'm not going to give up. And whether that's, again, writing a poem or hosting a sit-in, I'm going to see the end. Number 2, it is exhausting. I mentioned that 48-hour nap. I feel like I still need another 48-hour nap. It is exhausting, but it's also fulfilling. So when you get to the end and you're dusting off your shoulders again, just know that you did it and you should be proud that you did it. And number 3, both create change. Now, whether your poetry created change for yourself to be able to look down at your piece of paper and put your feelings in a succinct way that makes you feel better, or whether you were able to talk to 400 people at once and tell them what they really needed to hear to join you in your fight, you changed someone's life. When I started writing poetry, I never imagined that I would touch so many people's hearts with my words, or that I would inspire the idea of intersection between poetry and social justice. Writing poetry for me has always been something I can do other than crying or screaming or complaining. For me, it's an outlet. Every time I write a poem, every time I try to make flows to create an identical beat to the rushing of my pulse, I never go in with the intention to enact change. But again, it always happens. A poem is like a slowed down song, except there's no music, but there's this perfect melody that you're gonna hit. The repetition of words or phrases draws the listener in. The cadence of the raw emotion of the speaker is exactly what social justice is. In order for anything to change, no matter what specific area your passion resides in, you need people to listen to you. You need people to hear you, to feel just an ounce of what you feel, to be willing to carry a specific burden with you to the unmarked finish line. But you also need to carry yourself across that finish line. Poetry, for me at least, provides both. It captures the heart of your audience, and for me, gives me this little bubble I can get into to escape when things get hard. Now, I haven't given you all the tips and techniques of the step-by-step process to become MLK, Malcolm X, Langston Hughes, or Maya Angelou. I don't even think they could tell you how to become them. But I hope this talk has instilled one idea in your mind, and it is that you can be like them. You have the ability inside of you, a fire just waiting to be ignited. Keep that fire burning from start to finish. Don't let the middle scare you, and don't let the end harm you. Go through each step over and over again. Keep enduring, keep preserving, and all of the above, keep your passion. I hope you have also learned that the pen is just as mighty as the sword, and the two can work together in harmony. The pen and the sword can grow mightier together as one in our fight against social injustice. I hope you have enjoyed my TED Talk. Thank you for coming.